Most AI coding tools give you one agent that tries to do everything. But what if you could build your own specialized agents, each one designated for a specific job in your workflow, and then run them all directly from your terminal? Now that's exactly what I'm going to show you how to do in today's video using a tool called Mistral Vibe. However, the same strategy works in pretty much all of the popular coding tools, so while I'll be using Mistral Vibe, you could do this in really any tool at all, and it's more about how you orchestrate the agents than the tooling. Regardless, let's get into it. So I want to start by explaining why this matters before we build anything. And when you're working on a real project, you don't just want one generic AI that's doing everything. Ideally, you want agents that are focused. So you want one agent that knows how to test your code base, one agent that knows how to review your code, one agent that knows how to do the deployment, one that does the front end, one that does the back end. You get the idea, just like you would have different employees at a company. And when you have multiple sub-agents, this lets you define these specialized agents with custom instructions, tools, and permissions. Now they can inherit the full context of your project, but stay focused on their specific job. Now you can think of this like hiring a specialist instead of just having one generalist. Now I'm going to show you how to set up these multiple sub-agents and then how to orchestrate them to actually build a real project. But the tool I'm going to use to do that is called Mistral Vibe, which is a relatively new CLI-based coding tool that comes from Mistral, who kindly partnered with me on this video. Now the model behind this is pretty interesting. It's called Devstral 2, relatively new, it was released maybe 3 months ago when I'm filming this video. And I think the main thing to pay attention to here is that this is 7 times more cost efficient than something like Claude Sonnet. So if you're a real power user and you actually do want to have multiple sub-agents, run multiple terminal windows, etc., you know that using something like Anthropic can be extremely expensive. This has very similar real-world performance while also being 7 times more cost efficient. You can see that with Mistral Vibe, it's native. You're using an open source agent, so you could just go, download Devstral 2 if you want to run it yourself. You can also use Devstral Small 2, which is a smaller parameter model that you can do locally on your own computer or via their API, and that's compatible with on-prem deployment, all of that kind of stuff. And then of course, this is a SOTA model for code agents with a fraction of the parameters of its competitors. They got a 72.2% on SWE Bench Verified. So safe to say it's a good model, performs very well, much cheaper, much easier to run. You can run it locally, even on just decent hardware. And it's right up there with the current frontier models here from Gemini 3, GPT 5.1, Claude Sonnet. You guys get the idea. So I'm going to show you how to set this up, but very importantly, this is an open source model. You can fork it, modify it, do whatever you want with it, so you don't have the same vendor lock-in that you have with a lot of other platforms. Now, the way to install Mistral Vibe is just to grab this command here. I'll leave a link to it in the description. You can see there's a Python command and a bash command. Run it in your terminal, and then it will install the CLI tool. All right, so I've popped open my terminal. I'm just going to paste the command, go ahead and hit enter. And now I already have this installed on my machine, so you can see it was just extremely fast, didn't need to upgrade. And then in order to run this once it's installed, you can simply just type Vibe. So once you run that, you should be prompted to sign in. You can just create a free account, and you can also just run the model locally if you want. But if you do want to use the cloud-based options and you do want to be, power user, you want to run this a lot, then you can upgrade using the Pro or the Team plan. This is a part of the Le Chat subscription from Mistral. So Mistral also has like a cloud-based agent stuff that you can do here. And if you just go, again, I'll leave a link to it in the description. You can upgrade directly from here if you want to. And obviously that's up to you. You should probably try it for free before you go and do that. Okay, cool. So from here, what I want to do is start setting up the sub-agents. Let's see how it works. Okay, so first things first, if you want to see all of the commands here, you can type /help. There's a bunch of stuff that you can go through in terms of using this tool. For now, I'm just going to go /exit just because I actually want to change directories into an existing project that I'm working with. But of course, you don't need to do that for this video. So I'm going to change to my desktop, and I'm going to go to a fast API web app that I have. I actually had Mistral Vibe build this just for the tutorial. And what I'm going to do is just type Vibe, and then it's going to bring me inside of this directory where I could start running. Now, it's automatically going to read the Git history as well as just index the code base, so we'll understand the code and then we can start building. Now, before we dive into all of the specifics, I do want to talk about why it's important to have sub-agents in a little bit more detail so you understand the benefit, not just in this tool, but in any AI coding tool you're using. So when you're coding with just one general or kind of main agent, that agent has to juggle everything at once. So it has your architecture, your implementation details, the test files, configs, refactor, specs, all of this kind of stuff. Now, the more that you throw at it, the worse that it gets. And you can see this in, any example where you're coding for a long time and you start getting close to your context limit, that the model starts to really become not performant at all. And you essentially need to clear the whole context window and kind of restart, which can scrap a lot of the work that you've done and kind of the training that you've done on this model while you've been chatting with it. Now, this is actually called context dilution, and that's when the agent starts forgetting things, it's making inconsistent decisions, or it's just losing track of what you asked for. Now, the subagents solve this problem by giving each task its own isolated context. So the test writer, for example, only thinks about test. The reviewer only thinks about the code quality. They don't step into each other and suffer from the same context dilution. Now, what I want to talk about is something called context inheritance, because this is super important with subagents. Now, when you invoke a subagent, it's going to spawn as an independent process in its own context window. Now, it's going to inherit your project context automatically, so your file tree, your Git status, the code base structure, but it doesn't inherit the previous conversation history, including all of the tool calls, all of the file edits, and the things that really clog the context quite heavily. So it may start at 10, 15, 20% of the context window, but it's not starting at 80 or 90%, which the main agent will suffer from really quickly. Now, the key deal here is that it knows about your project, but it doesn't know about the other stuff in the previous session, which is what allows it to stay focused. Now, I have a quick web dashboard that I just spun up here to understand this better, but when you create an agent, it's going to look something like this. Now, you can have the tool build it for you, you can build it yourself, but you can create these TOML files where you can put the name, the description, the instructions of the agent. It doesn't look exactly like this, but this is like a general overview. You can put the safety, so okay, can it call tools? Can it not call tools? Can it take actions without permission? How many turns can it take? What's the maximum price you want to spend on it, right? Again, this is just an example. It doesn't look exactly like this. And for this specific tool, you're going to put this in the .vibe/agents folder. However, for other tools, they have their own kind of agent directory, which you have to look up in the docs. Now, another benefit of creating these subagents is that you can run them asynchronously in the background. So you could have 3 different agents, 5 different agents, 10 different agents, doesn't matter, running at the same time in parallel, all achieving their goals because they have independent tasks that you've defined. Now, another thing just to keep in mind is that when you create these agents, you really do want to do some permission scoping, which we'll look at in a minute, where, for example, with the agents we're going to create in this video, like a test writer, code reviewer, deploy prep, right? We want to have only the ability to run tests, for example, file read, file write, but not access Git, not access the network, right? Have a maximum price on it. And you want to do this so that these agents only have a really limited sandbox, which also just makes them perform a lot better. So anyways, this is what we're going to go through here. I think it's time that we actually create some agents and use the tool. Let's do so. So for the project I already have, just to keep things simple, I just have a simple fast API backend and just a normal kind of HTML, JS front end here. As you can see, we have a few JS files, index.html. I know it's quite small, but that's all that we're starting with. Now, what I want to do is just quickly run the application. So let's go back into Vibe. I'm going to tell it just to improve it, make it a little bit larger. Let's run it. Let's have a look at it. And then I want to start creating the first subagent, which is going to be to write automated tests, which I know nobody likes to do. So what I'll say is, I would like you to improve this application by making it a lot more complex, separating things out into different files, creating a little bit more complex kind of directory structure. And then I want you to run the application for me so I can test it out and see what it looks like. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and run that. And by the way, if you're wondering what I'm using to dictate, it's a really cool tool called Whisper Flow, free to use, and I have a long-term partnership with them. I'll leave a link to it in the description because it is very, very good at giving you just fast formatted text that really is a lot better than other dictation tools in most operating systems. So I'm going to approve a lot of the commands you can see here. I'm going to say yes. Let's always just allow it to do grep. It's actually quite fast, generally speaking, I would say, compared to a lot of the other models that I've used. Once it's done, we'll be right back, and then we can see what the app actually looks like. All right, so we've got the finished app here. I'm just gonna log in, and you can see that we just have like these kind of different items that we can add, and it's assigned to the account, so something like this. And we can just have different accounts, sign in, all of this kind of stuff. The actual application is not super important, but I just had Mistral kind of spin this up a little bit for us so we have something a little bit more complex. Now, like I was saying, what we want to do is create a custom subagent. Now, in terms of creating the agents, there's a few different ways to do this, and I just want to quickly go through it. So I'm in the documentation here. I'll leave the link in the description. And you have the ability here to create a main agent or multiple main agents, as well as subagents. Now, we're mostly focused on subagents in this video, but you also can create a main agent, which you can invoke directly. So you'll see that Mistral out of the box actually comes with 5 agents: default, plan, accept edits, auto approve, and explore. And it will auto delegate tasks as needed between those different agents. Now, to create your own custom agent, not subagent, what you can do is just simply create a file like this inside of .vibe/agents, which is a TOML file. Now, you don't need to make this manually. You can just tell the tool to make it for you. But the point is that you'll notice that it doesn't specify that it's a subagent. Now, in order to invoke that agent, what you would need to do is use a command like this, where you do vibe /agent, and then the name of the agent you want to use. Now, when you do that, your main session is now going to use this new agent with whatever instruction, prompt, and enabled tools you've provided. This is useful if you want the main agent to be, a specific type of agent, right, that you've described. Now, in most cases, we don't want an additional main agent. What we want is sub-agents. Now, you can see with the sub-agent that we can run in parallel. So it can do background tasks, right, and then bring that task to the forefront as soon as it's finished. It also runs in memory without saving the session logs, and like we said, it inherits the context. Now, the way that we make the sub-agent is the same as the main agent, but we specify the agent type as sub-agent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this right here, and I'm going to go and I'm just going to open up Vibe again. I just cleared it so we have kind of a fresh screen, and I'm just going to tell it, create a sub-agent called test writer that is responsible for writing backend tests, specifically using the PyTest framework in Python. It only tests the backend of the application. Refer to this documentation for creating it. And then I'm just going to put some lines and then paste the documentation and hit enter, and it should create that for us. Okay, so it looks like it has been created here. Now, in this case, we're just using some really basic settings, right? Where the safety is safe, we're giving it the ability to grep, read file, write files, bash. We might not want to do all of that, but for now, when we're testing, that is going to be necessary. And then we give the description where we say we just want to use PyTest. Now, we could go a lot more in depth, and that would obviously improve the quality of this agent. But for now, at least, if we want to generate a test, it should automatically use this agent if we reference it. Okay, just quick pause. I just cleared the screen here so it's a little bit easier to see. What I'm going to do now to invoke the agent, like I said, is the following. Run the test writer sub agent as a background task and write authentication tests for our backend. Okay, and let's hit enter and see what we get. So you can see that it's running the agent, it completed in one turn, and now it's just going through and reading some of the stuff. So now the main agent is back, but the point is I can spin up as many of these agents as I want in the background, and then it completes the test. So now it's just looking to see what tests were written, to check to make sure that's actually done, but that sub agent did execute in the background, as we can see with that task right here. Okay, so we can see that it's given us the result here. We have all of these tests written, and now I'm just going to ask it to execute those. Using the test writer agent, execute these tests and make sure that they work. Run this as a sub agent and give me the result. And actually, let's run 5 of these agents at the same time just to make sure the tests work in different situations. That doesn't really totally make sense, but I just want to show you that we can do that. So let's see, and you see it spins up 5 different test writer agents for us running in the background. Now, because we didn't just give it full permissions, I do need to approve some of the commands here. So I have to go yes and allow, yes and allow, yes and allow, right? So we can actually execute the commands. But in the TOML file, if I wanted it to run without me having to ask that, then I could just change that, because this is quite annoying because all the agents are delegating back to the main agent to get the permission to run the tests. Okay, so we can see the test agents have completed running here. We have all of the logs, gives us the results, and now we're good to go. So let's move on and let's just create another agent. This one could be faster. Create a new sub agent, which is a code reviewer. This should not have the ability to run bash commands. It should just be able to read code. I want it to focus mostly on security and performance issues in the code and give recommendations without making any changes. Okay, so let's go ahead and press enter here and see if it can generate a new sub agent for us. Now, while this is running here, I'll just mention that another benefit of having these sub agents and creating them persistently is that other people on your team can actually use them, because you're sharing them in the folder where you have like the Git repo for your project. So you can typically make agents at a global level, so you can use them in any of your sessions, or you can do them at a project level, which is what we're doing, where you can use them directly just inside of this project. So if I go into a new project, I'll have a new set of agents specifically for that, similar to how you can set up various skills, right, which are repeatable workflows. Okay, so we can see that it has created the code reviewer agent here. Notice we just have read file and grep. We enabled auto approve, so we don't need to automatically do that. And it doesn't have access to bash, right, or anything destructive. So now what we can do is ask it to run that agent. So let's do the following actually. Okay, so again, just cleared the screen so it's a little bit easier to see, but we now have the code reviewer as well as the test writer agent. Let's just try the code reviewer first. Use the code reviewer sub agent to review the code base. And let's see if it can spin that up and give us a review. Okay, and we can see the agent's completed, and we now get the security issues, error handling, all of this kind of stuff. Now let's go a step further. Let's make one more agent, then let's trigger all 3 of them to run in parallel. Then it will be done. So like I was saying, we're going to make a new sub agent. I just cleared the screen. The one I want to make is a deploy preparation agent. So I'm just going to say, create a deploy preparation agent, which will run the full test suite, run the linter, and ensure there's no bugs or issues by running the code review agent before I deploy. Follow this exact format below, just create the agent in my local directory, so it's in the .vibe/agents folder, like the same format as the existing agents that I have. Okay, and then I'm just going to paste again the format just so it knows how to create it, and we should be good. Okay, so just because of what I pasted there, it put it in the wrong directory, but now I just had it move. So I just said, hey, put it in the right directory, and we moved it over, and we're all good. And now we can try to test the agent. So I'm going to say, run the deploy prep sub agent. Okay, and you can see that it's running the agent now, and it's just asking me for the approval, obviously, because I didn't give it auto approve, which I could if I want to. And you can see that it's going to go through and then run the deploy preparation. Okay, and we can see here that it's completed. It actually went through a full process here of running everything, and it said that the code base is now ready for deployment. Now, the final step here, just to kind of show what's possible, will be to run all three of the sub agents at the same time. So let's just try that. Run the deploy prep sub agent, the code review sub agent, and the test writer agent. Write any tests that we don't already have so we have full coverage. Make sure that the code base is reviewed properly, and then make sure that we're ready for deployment. Run all of these in parallel in the background as sub agents. Okay? And let's press enter and see what we get. All right, so the agent's completed. And again, the massive benefit is that you can run them in parallel here. So you can have multiple sessions at the exact same time without having to wait for one agent to complete before the next one can begin. Now look, with that said, that's pretty much going to cover everything. I wanted to show you how to create multiple sub-agents, how you can use it inside of this tool, and how specifically you can parallelize your workflow by spinning these up in the background. While we did this in Mistral Vibe, you can do this in really any AI coding tool that you want. And generally speaking, whenever you have kind of more dynamic, repeatable tasks that are well suited to kind of specialists, you want to create these agents. Then if you have a really specific workflow, you can add skills on top of this, which really makes this a lot more powerful, and those agents can then utilize those skills. And the benefit is you can share the skills in the agents with your teammates, so once you improve them and make them good, it's not just being used on your machine, but the whole team can benefit. Anyways, that's it for this video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.